At Round Glass, we focus on holistic well being. And holistic well being starts with emotional well being, a skill that is rarely taught and assumed to be naturally learned. Today, we have to break that myth. We have to really understand how to build our own emotional intelligence. I'm Prakriti Poddar. I'm the global head for mental health and well being here at Round Glass. My guest today is Marc Brackett. He's been studying emotions for decades. He's the founding director of the Yale University Center for Emotional Intelligence, and he's the author of Permission to Feel: Unlocking the Power of Emotions to Help Our Kids, Ourselves, and Our Society Thrive. For 25 years, Marc's research has focused on the role that emotional intelligence plays in learning, decision making, creativity, relationships, and health. I'm really excited to have this conversation to really discover how to unlock our own emotional intelligence. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I want to thank all of our virtual audience for attending today. And if any of you have any questions that come up, experiences that you want to share, and just curiosity around emotional intelligence, please do add them to the chat. I love to hear from you and really look forward to it being an interactive session. Marc, I have spent the last 2 or 3 days really investigating all the work that you've been doing and listening to all the podcasts that you've been on. There's been so much information about the work that you do. And I thought that I would start with the same sort of question of how are you, but then, I realized it's just too cliche because everybody's doing that. But I know that before we came on, just to check the mic, you said, how are you? And I went with the same old answer of not too bad. And then I felt guilty because I was like, hey, I just read sort of everything that you're talking about. I've listened to it and I still went back to not being authentic with my answer.
Mhm.
So, really, can you sort of shed light on that question and our responsibility to that question, whether we're sort of expressing it or listening?
Well, actually, why don't you let's do it. Ask me how I'm feeling.
Okay. How are you, Marc?
Fine.
Oh,
Right.
no.
That's what we typically do, right? We just say fine, good, and then we move
Yeah.
on. Ask me again if you don't mind.
Yeah. Marc, how are you?
Well, I'm having this kind of odd mixture today of like tension from doing this recording and anxiety about the future, and I'm overwhelmed about all things going on in my life, and I'm feeling a little bit of despair about what's happened in our nation this week, and a lot.
Oh, I
And now
know this is a
I'm looking at your facial expression. You're like, why did I ask the question?
no. I was actually just gonna say, you know what? I was going through a similar thing, and then yesterday, Mashan, who's spoken with you before, told me that listen, you have to look at Marc's app. So I went to our app, which is How You Feel, and I was not feeling that great. And I thought maybe I'm on the low spectrum of not feeling that great. So I went to like, your low emotions, and I saw the word meh. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling meh. And I, and then I'm like, but meh is not really describing like how I'm really feeling. And then when I went to sort of the highly charged words, I realized I was furious. I was anxious, I was angry, I was overwhelmed, I was hopeless. Like there were so many emotions, and it's not just one emotion. And because of the tragedy that's taken place at Robb Elementary School in Texas, I mean, it really brought on a lot of fear in me. I have 3 kids, two in like the system here, and I was, I was wounded, and I'm as an emotional and mental health practitioner myself. I really I'm lost to A, support myself, B, support people that are going through this. Like, how do you do it when you're invested in the emotion yourself? How do you help others at this point?
Well, I think, we think that helping is kind of always doing, but sometimes helping is just being present. And so, my recommendations are right now is that don't feel like you have to solve people's problems. Don't feel you have to have the answers. Just be, that compassionate, empathic, non-judgmental parent, friend, lover. Um, and I think that will make a huge difference. And it's that simple, honestly.
Be there and be present. You know, it takes me to a conversation I just had with a girlfriend of mine who going through certain events in her life, and she's so strong. And we, in a lot of cultures, we honor that strength, but it takes away from truly speaking to your feelings because there's a wall that's created. And when I asked her, I tried to delve into it and said, why do you need to own this strength? Like, you can speak to people. And her response really was that nobody would really know how to hold her conversation with her. How do you be that person who can hold a safe space while somebody is expressing? It's almost that fear of, okay, I will speak about this and I'll be let down because nobody's really been there to, like your Uncle Marvin, nobody's been there to support that conversation. And of course we'll
Hmm.
talk about Uncle Marvin later, but you know it's almost the folly of our universal upbringing. In a sense, how do we actually not only trust the other person in that conversation, but trust ourselves to be able to commit to a conversation that would help us emotionally heal?
Well, you're bringing up a lot of things now, right? Is that when you ask the question, how are you feeling? And you do it in an authentic way, a few things have to happen. The first is the person that you ask that question to, they have to believe that you care, that you want to hear. They also have to have the words to describe their feelings accurately. And then when you share, like I shared with you, I'm feeling a bit despair and anxious and overwhelmed. When I share that with you, there is an expectation that you're going to be able to support me in one way or another. And so this gets, as we'll talk soon about these underlying skills of emotional intelligence that unfortunately many people have not developed because we haven't had it part of our education system until very recently.
Yeah. And I want to actually, Mark, go back to that question that you answered, because I see that what I did was say, yeah, I totally get what you're saying, because, and then I give you something that I went through. But I did not respond to the content and the feeling of what you're saying. And that's a
Yeah.
skill that I really want you to break that down in that role play. What should I have said that would make you feel heard in that moment? Rather than me saying, I get what you're saying, and then I move on to something that is similar in as much as what I went through. So instead of
Yeah.
playing like tennis with your emotions and my own conversation, like, how do I hold that space where I go deeper in with you versus going into a different trajectory?
I mean, the first is just showing that you're listening and say, Mark, it's understandable. It seems like a lot's been going on for you. You said you're feeling all these emotions. Do you want to share, what's making you feel that way? And then you start listening for those themes. Oh, you're feeling uncertainty around this. You're feeling hopeless about that. You're feeling like that's an injustice in our society. And that gives you data, that gives you information to ask more questions, not to solve the problem for me, because no one wants someone to regulate for them. Nobody wants someone to tell them what to do. Right? That doesn't help. Like, calm down. That never works. Right? If you've done it with your kids, I need you to calm down. Right? Yeah, I'll give you a calm. Um, but what works is maybe saying, what do you need right now? And let the person share what they're thinking about what would help them to manage their feelings. So in that way, you don't have to be the knower, you have to be the learner.
Yeah. And that's what you call the emotion scientist, I suppose, where you're
Yeah.
like really uncovering, like, what is this person? It's a research into you. I need to be invested
Yeah.
in you, and I need to invest my time in you to
Correct.
truly sort of help open that up a little bit.
Yes. And you
I
also have to
know that.
pull away you have to pull away any biases that you might have, which is difficult, right? Because we tend to want people to feel the way we feel about things. Like, how come you're not angry? You should be angry about that. Well, no, based on who I am and based on my experiences, I'm feeling this way. You're feeling that way. And guess what? It's all okay.
Yeah. I think you bring it to a very important point, um, and that's the frame of reference, right? Like it's like where have I built my emotional well-being standards or triggers, and what does that mean to me as I navigate my life? And so, therefore, what you would be going through in an experience, whether the experience is the same, but the manifestation of that experience within us is so different,
Hmm.
and it's shaped by our history. I'd really, before we get into what that means, I'd like you to share a bit about your history, whatever you feel comfortable with. I know you've been very open about it in the
Hmm.
past, and really how that's shaped who you are today, and how we can all learn from the kind of lessons that we've had in our lives that can be utilized in a sense to bring about a positive change in our life.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the way I think about it is that you don't really know someone until you know their story. And so, like right now, we're getting to know each other. I can get a feeling, are you neurotic? Are you outgoing? Are you friendly? Those are traits. And you get to know people pretty quickly at a party. Like, oh, this person, is very outgoing and sociable. This person's not. Then you get to know people in terms of, what drives them, what motivates them, what their interests are. And then there's the story. And so for many years, I was sharing my kind of level one and level two, but I never really was safe or felt safe and comfortable to share my real reason for doing this work. And it took me until I was 49 years old and writing my book, Permission to Feel, that I decided like I got to be honest and authentic about it. So just briefly, um, I had two parents who loved me. Uh, I would say neither one of them went to the School of Emotional Intelligence. And so, my father was a self-proclaimed tough guy. But, he was like, son, you got to toughen up. You got to toughen up, son. My mother was quite anxious and was always saying things like, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. And learned very early in my life, I'm not going to talk to my parents about what I'm feeling. And at the same time, growing up in my neighborhood in New Jersey, sadly, I was sexually abused from when I was 5 years old until I was about 10 years old. And obviously quite painful and frightening and scary. Um, and I share that because I really believe that I was robbed of my emotional life as a child. I didn't have the permission to feel, to be my true self until one day, which was sitting in the backyard of my house when I was 11. My mother's brother, whose name is Uncle Marvin, who happened to be writing a curriculum to teach kids about their feelings, he was sitting with me, um, and he asked me that same question, which is, how are you feeling? And he was non-judgmental, empathic, compassionate. And when I shared what was happening, finally, he was the first person I shared everything to. He didn't say toughen up or I can't handle this. He just looked at me and he said, we're going to get through this together. And so I'm on a mission to create a world that's filled with Uncle Marvins. And I call them my emotion revolutionaries.
I love that. Sorry, I got choked on my water, but from your story, I have to say that 11 is a very brave age as well. I've been a victim of abuse myself, and it took me till I was like 24 to even
Yeah.
accept it for myself. But I didn't have any Uncle Marvin. I still don't actually have an Uncle Marvin, and so just to be on that mission to create Uncle Marvin's is would be so phenomenal. I know that in India I have a foundation that does mental health awareness, and I also used to run a center for emotional development. And it isn't easy, and there it's kind of a little more um, difficult because it's so rampant. Abuse is so rampant, and
Hmm.
there are large family systems staying together, so there's a lot of abuse even within the family structures. And this is not to do with different levels of society. It's really in every level of society.
Hmm.
But the stigma is so high that there's no conversation around it. Family values and family face is a little more important than than a personal emotional experience. And I think that you being able to show up at 11, first of all, really congratulations for that, considering you were also going through bullying at school and a whole lot of other things. I mean, it's really impressive. And I don't think that you impress upon yourself often enough that to show up at 11 is a huge
Well,
thing. I mean,
but remember that it took the adult who the context for me to do that. The
yeah,
abuser threatened me. I was threatened by my abuser that if I shared, I would be harmed, my family would be harmed. For some reason, based on my family's experiences, I wasn't safe or comfortable to even talk about it with my own parents. But yet, this uncle came into my life, and facial expression, body language, vocal tone, whatever it was, right? He created the conditions for me to be my true self. And we
yeah,
can't underestimate the power of people doing that for children, couples doing that for each other, leaders and managers doing that for their employees. I'm talking
yeah,
right now about an uncle nephew relationship, but
yeah.
these relationships we need for our entire life.
Yeah, it's super important to be that person as an adult now for somebody else as well. Um, I think that training. I know you're working with 2,000 schools and more every day. Literally, that number grows. I do feel that we need to spread this wide with like just people who are not in the schooling system, because we're the perpetrators. We literally don't listen. We don't listen to. I mean, while I was listening to your work, I heard a conversation with you and Brené Brown, and she was talking about like at 7:45 when she's in the car, she just wants to go and like talk to her kid in the car, right? And I was like, I know that. my kid's been at home for like 4 days saying that he's got a cough and he has a cough and he's just not been well. And I'm like, you're going to school today because I don't want to hear that you're not feeling well. You're going to school
Mhm.
today, right? And he's messaging me right now, and I'm like, I'm busy. I don't want to talk right now, right? So I
Mhm.
know that it's difficult. At work, oh my God, we are a well-being company, and if somebody shows up once or twice, I think we're compassionate. But if somebody shows up 5 times, 10 times like that, we desensitize ourselves and lose that compassion. I mean, how do we actually truly authentically be there without counting the amount of times that we've been there? It almost feels like my resilience is 3 times that I can be there for a person, and then after that it's like, if you're not going to help yourself, I can't help you. I don't want to think like that. I want to become
Yeah,
sensitive, a little more sensitive, and I feel like I am sensitive, but a little bit more might
you're
actually
showing a
push
lot
other.
about yourself right now. um, what I would say is that we have to know a number of things. One is, I don't think anybody really understands the science of emotion, that emotions drive our attentional capacity. We learn what we care about. We pay attention to things that bring us to that curiosity level. Emotions drive our decision making. Think about that for a minute. When we're in certain moods, we make better and worse decisions. Our emotions drive the quality of our relationships. Our facial expressions, our body language, our vocal tone sends messages: approach, avoid, approach, avoid. Our emotions drive our mental health. Think about that for a minute. Right now, we're in a society where people are feeling tremendous amount of unpleasant feelings, anxiety and depression. We don't have strategies to manage those emotions. Think about what happens. And finally, in the workplace, emotions drive creativity. They drive performance. I always say that emotions are the fuel of our creativity, and our emotional intelligence is what determines whether or not that creativity actually becomes a product.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to break it down now, just simplify all of it. What is
Sure.
emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So we use an acronym to describe the skills of emotional intelligence, and it's RULER, RULER. The first skill, recognizing emotions, paying attention to my feelings, to your feelings. What's going on for me in my head? What am I noticing in your facial expression, in your body language, and your vocal tone. The U is understanding of emotions. What's causing my feelings? What's the consequence of my feelings? What's the difference between feeling anger and disappointment? Most people can't tell me the difference. They don't understand emotions. Labeling emotions, having that precise word to describe your feeling. Is it anger? Is it peeved? Is it enraged? Is it nervous? Is it anxious? Is it overwhelmed? The E in ruler stands for expressing emotion, knowing how and when to express emotions with different people across contexts and understanding the cultural lens that we bring to our emotions. And then finally, the big R in ruler stands for regulation, those strategies that we use to manage our own feelings and help other people to manage theirs.
That's amazing. I know that you've also come up with this chart of 100 emotions, which you call the mood meter. I want to
Yep.
first show everybody what that is.
I'm gonna show it here.
Oh, awesome.
You've
Can you
got it.
also explain that to the audience?
Sure. Well, actually, to the inside of my book, very, very easily, the yellow quadrant is our emotions that are high energy and pleasant. So feeling excited and happy and elated and ecstatic. The green quadrant are emotions that are pleasant but lower in energy, like feeling calm, content, peaceful, tranquil, relaxed. The blue and the red, I want to say up front, these are unpleasant emotions. They are not negative emotions. They're not bad emotions. They're just unpleasant. Red, high energy, unpleasant, like anxiety, frustration, overwhelm. And then the blue, emotions that are kind of low energy but unpleasant, sad, lonely, disappointed, feeling maybe hopeless. And so this is a model that's based in a lot of science to help people unpack how they're feeling through this pleasantness axis and that energy axis. And you cross those to create your 4 quadrants.
Thank you. I think that's great because it also took me to that new app that you've launched because I was
Yeah.
like very excited about it. And when I think the quadrants are very much mentioned there, I mean, in the way that it's laid out, and I love the graphics that come up with each. It's quite it's fun. Maybe you've got a little
Yeah.
snapshot for people to see this, but it was truly, I've timed it twice a day for myself. So
Oh,
I
cool.
can actually, yeah, I can check in the morning and I can check in the evening. And there is a huge switch. And I'm thinking, hey, one second, am I manic here? But I really feel like a couple of, like a week or something of, or maybe a month of doing this would really give me a sort of good amount of information about what not only about my emotions and the structure of it, but how I can use my cycle of emotions to help me in my creative time, to help me in my introspection time, to help me in my playful time, because I feel like I actually have moments in the day that go through these emotions, and it would really help give me a little bit more depth in my understanding because I've never mapped it before. So really good tool for me to map it, is how I want to use what you've shared. And I'm sure you've built it for many different reasons, but for me, I know
Yeah.
I could use it for that purpose.
Well, I was very fortunate that I met the founder and CEO of Pinterest, Ben Silberman, a couple of years ago, and he and a bunch of volunteers from Pinterest and I, along with a team at Yale, collaborated and have a separate nonprofit called How We Feel, where the app lives. And I wanted to say up front that we've made it available for free, and the goal is that well-being, right? We want to make sure that you don't have to pay for this app, that you can get it and use it for free. And what's cool about it, as you were mentioning, is that not only does it have the mood meter tool to check in with your feelings, but you can then track your feelings based on who you're with, what you're doing, and where you're at. And then after you've used it for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, you can analyze your data and say, oh my goodness, I've been in the blue with these people. I've been in the yellow when I'm doing that.
Wow.
And give you insights to then make a change. And really importantly, built into the app are over 30 research-based strategies to help people regulate their feelings.
Wow, I'd really like to understand a few top strategies that help people regulate.
Yeah, I mean, we know the big ones that everybody's doing these days. Everybody's doing breathing exercises, right? And so, taking those breaths is helpful. Although I have to tell you, during the pandemic, my mother-in-law moved in with us, and I would do all these breathing exercises, and then I would be like, "I'm even clearer why you need to go home." And so I needed more than breathing. And so, like, the breathing exercises are great for deactivating us, helping us be more present. But we need cognitive strategies. My favorite one is called reframing or reappraisal. It's like forcing myself to look at something from a different perspective. Um, Reaching out and connecting socially is a critical one. You know, being kind to others, showing your appreciation. What's really cool about that is that when you're kind and compassionate to others, you notice a shift in their expression, and that becomes contagious, and then you feel better as well. Other big ones, right? We all know this is physical activity, eating healthy foods, getting enough sleep. In my most recent study, what we found was that quality sleep was one of the best predictors of healthy emotion regulation.
Wow. I don't get much sleep. I need to fix that for myself. I know
Important.
you have two dogs, and my I don't. What dogs do you have actually? Are they big breed or small breeds?
No, they're little ones. They're pandemic puppies, and they're fabulous. Other than every day at 5:15 in the morning, they're licking our faces because they want to go out to the bathroom. um, they brought us a lot of pleasure.
That's exactly what I was talking about. I have these two dogs as well. They're not small breeds. They're pretty big breeds. They're on top of me in the morning. And I'm like, 1 second. I need to sleep to be in my best state. Can you guys? But they're still puppies as well. So they're like a year old, maybe 11 months old. So they haven't really got to sleeping through the night. So I'm still
Hmm.
struggling a little bit with my sleep. But the day that I can get good sleep, actually, unfortunately for me, the time that I can get good sleep is like on a long distance flight, which I'm going to go on today. So that's where I get my sleep. But I know exactly what you're saying, because the days I don't get my sleep, I am cranky. And then I need caffeine, and caffeine makes me, I think what you said initially, like neurotic and like
Wired and
behaviors
tight.
that are not generally my pattern, because usually I'm just like quiet, except for when I have that caffeine. That caffeine hit jolts me into a new emotional state, which sometimes I need. Um, I know that one of the things that I want to really understand is how do people, like, what is that one thing that a person can do to just pause themselves? I know we're saying breathing, etc., but that all comes with first understanding that you need to take a break. And I know that when I am in a state of hypervigilance, or when I'm in a state that is reactionary, um, it's difficult for me to
Yeah.
be aware that I need to take a pause. And I feel like it's in that moment that most people make mistakes. It's in that moment. And the training that you're giving will extend that time. But for somebody like me, maybe who's also reactionary, how do I make that a trigger for myself, whether it's a physical trigger or a mental trigger? How can I make that a part of my behavior?
Yeah. Well, importantly, it takes time and effort. And that's actually, that's why I wrote my book, to give people that knowledge, and why we have our program ruler in schools, and why I co-founded a company called OG Life Lab to help people in the workplace do this work. And what we have to do is train our brains to go from automatic reaction to automatic breathing or automatic pausing. But then you got to fill that space with something. And one thing I'm just going to recommend, because we don't have much time, is to find a way to activate your best self. So, for example, when I get really triggered and activated, I say, Mark, what would the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence do right now? Because Mark wants to say something not so kind. But Mark, the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence, right, is going to be kind of like a wizard and compassionate, like Yoda. And it works. And we've got research to show it. So
Wow.
pause, breathe, activate an image of your best self, and respond through that lens.
Amazing. I love it. There's a question from the chat, which we should take before we close. It's from Brandon. He says, when you're processing your emotions and you are feeling several different ones, do you just take them one at a time to process through it, or all of it, which is more holistic?
So it depends on the situation, but I think most of us are experiencing more than one emotion at a time. What I would ask is, which emotion is most prevalent, in that moment. So, for example, I'm feeling like you, a lot of sadness and, you know, just the tension from what's happened in our nation. And I would say that's kind of like in my background. Right now, I'm in a conversation with you. And so I want to know, like, what is the emotion that I'm feeling right here, right now with you? And is that the emotion that's helpful or unhelpful to being my best self? And so I have to do that kind of like analysis of I'm experiencing lots of emotions, but which one, is top of mind for what I'm doing in the present? And is that helpful or unhelpful? If it's helpful, keep going. If it's unhelpful, try to think about a different strategy.
I hope you're having good emotions when you're sitting here with me.
I know.
Because it would be really bad if you said, okay, I'm sitting here and you're making me really anxious, Prakriti.
That wasn't a Freudian slip or anything like that, I promise you.
I mean, I'm so in tune with what you're saying that I even wore a heart on myself to say, I'm
Look
gonna
at
like
that.
put my heart out there. I'm gonna actually use this today as my trigger to, to trigger me into actually responding through my emotional center.
Actually,
It's
it's important. I'm glad that you said that because you can use that as a reminder to be your best self. So that heart, right? When you get activated by somebody, you just put your hand on it or you remember it's
that's
there and say, how would how would I with the heart respond versus I who is triggered respond? It will
yeah.
help, I promise
I love it. Actually, I do clinical hypnotherapy, and in that, you can give a trigger, and I decided that I would be best served today by by doing this and sort of incorporating everything that you've taught us, because you've taught us so much. I really want to thank you for all your amazing insights. I hope it's helped everybody that's been here, because you've given us so much to not only think about, but also given us tools to learn how to process our emotions and take that time and space between our reactions to breathe and look at ourselves through the lens of the person we need to be. And I love that, because we have that impression. We know exactly who we want to be, and and we know what our best self, our higher self, would look and feel and sound like. So, being able to
you.
use that in practice is so important, Mark. I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And before we end, I want to remind you about Mark's book, Permission to Feel: Unlocking the Power of Emotions to Help Our Kids, Ourselves, and Our Societies Thrive. It's available everywhere that books are sold. I love that, by the way. I mean, most people have it like it's available on Amazon. This is available everywhere. So you don't have an excuse. Just go get it, because we all need it. There's no expert here. This is a work in progress. We're moving from being emotional judges to emotional scientists, as you said. So um,
That's it.
I really, I want to implore everybody to get the book.
Thank you so
And
much. And
sorry, go ahead.
no, I just want to say, if I had like my magic dust in my pocket and I could throw it across, I'd just give, the magic powder to give everyone permission to feel,
Oh, I'm taking it.
because it is, I think it's the beginning, like that we can just start by giving ourselves and everyone we love, and even the people we don't love that much, right? Just the permission to be their true, fulfilling selves. If we can go there first, I think great things can happen.
It does. I feel so great after this conversation. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Um, you can also search Round Glass Living app or our website, which is roundglass.com, to find additional resources. Thank you so much for joining us.